Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by Atheist Society in Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am John Webster.
And I am Imam Fatah. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed for a little, rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
On today's show, we're going to ask and answer 10 questions for God.
But first, we want to tell you a little about the sponsors for our show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Baldy's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday we hold the Skeptic Book Club. On the fourth Sunday we're mixing it up. Sometimes we get together we call a reflection meeting. It features a potluck lunch in some homes. Sometimes we meet to play board games or similar activities.
Later in the show, we will give you our websites to visit for additional details, including times and locations.
So in the news, around the nation, but mostly I think in the southeast, there are government employees who are refusing to do their job to issue marriage certificates.
Apparently they have decided they're above the law and Constitution. Some of them have resigned their jobs, which I guess is the more honorable thing to do, and some are still expecting to collect their paycheck while derelict of their duty.
So John, why do you think they refuse to do their job?
Honestly, I guess they think that their religious liberties are being threatened. That's my take.
Well, I have actually a quiz. Maybe we can ask people this quiz and see how we can determine this. So it's actually an article from Huffington Post, and it's how to determine if your religious liberty is being threatened in just 10 quick questions. So the first question is, my religious liberty is at risk because?
A, I am not allowed to go to a religious service of my own choosing. Or B, others are allowed to go to religious services of their own choosing.
2, my religious liberty is at risk because?
A, I am not allowed to marry the person I love legally, even though my religious community blesses my marriage. B, some states refuse to enforce my own particular religious beliefs on marriage on those two guys in line down at the courthouse.
Third question is, my religious liberty is at risk because?
A, I'm being forced to use birth control. B, I am unable to force others to not use birth control.
My religious liberty is at risk because?
A, I am not allowed to pray privately. Or B, I am not allowed to force others to pray the prayers of my faith publicly.
My religious liberty is at risk because?
A, being a member of my faith means that I can be bullied without legal recourse. Or B, I am no longer allowed to use my faith to bully gay kids with impunity.
My religious liberty is at risk because?
A, I am not allowed to purchase, read, or possess religious books or material. Or B, others are allowed to have access to books, movies, and websites that I do not like.
Well, let's see. The seventh question is, my religious liberty is at risk because?
A, my religious group is not allowed equal protection under the Establishment Clause. Or B, my religious group is not allowed to use public funds, buildings, and resources that we would like for whatever purposes we might like.
My religious liberty is at risk because?
A, another religious group has been declared the official faith of my country. Or B, my own religious group is not given status as the official faith of my country.
Number 9, my religious liberty is at risk because?
A, my religious community is not allowed to build a house of worship in my community. Or B, a religious community I do not like wants to build a house of worship in my community.
Well, last question for you, John. My religious liberty is at risk because?
A, I'm not allowed to teach my children the creation stories of our faith at home. Or B, public school science classes are teaching science.
That's a great quiz, right? Well, let's look at the scoring key. So, if you answered A to any question, then perhaps your religious liberty is indeed at stake. You and your faith group have every right to now advocate for equal protection under the law. But just remember this one little constitutional concept. This means you can fight for your equality, not your superiority. And big underlines here. If you answer B to any of these questions, then not only is your religious liberty at stake, but there is a strong chance that you are oppressing the religious liberty to others. This is the point where I would invite you to refer back to the tenets of your faith, especially the ones about your neighbors. In closing, no matter what sound bites you hear this election year, remember this: religious liberty is never secured by a campaign of religious superiority. The only way to ensure your own religious liberty remains strong is by advocating for religious liberty of all, including those of whom you may passionately disagree with, because they deserve the same right as you are, nothing more, nothing less. So, let's hear from the closing paragraph of the Obergefell versus Hodges. No union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals for love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family. In forming a marital union, two people become something greater than once they were. As some of the petitioners in this case demonstrate, marriage embodies a love that may endure even past death.
It would misunderstand these men and women to say they disrespect the idea of marriage. They're pleased that they do respect it so deeply that they seek to find its fulfillment for themselves. Their hope is not to be condemned to live in loneliness, excluded of one of civilization's oldest institutions. They ask for equal dignity in the eyes of law. The Constitution grants them that right.
And the ruling finally concludes, the judgment of the Court of Appeal to the Sixth Circuit is reserved. It is so ordered. So let's go to our main program, John.
Okay. Summary. We're going to talk about the Garden of Eden, the Great Flood, the testing of Abraham's faith, the Exodus, the test for an unfaithful wife, the response to a man gathering firewood on the Sabbath, Elisha and the two bears, the story of Job, Jesus' birth, and Jesus' crucifixion. What do all these events have in common? They are all 10 instances of God's decision-making where I could have come up with better alternatives. Let us begin in the beginning.
Remember, this is a call-in show, so we would invite you to participate with your favorite question by calling the number on the screen.
In the beginning, in the Bible, it says God created the heavens and the earth. Eventually, He creates a man and a woman. Up until this point, God has made everything out of virtually nothing by merely speaking it into existence. What is needed to form man? Dust. Go figure. He then creates woman. Does he need more dust? No. He causes the man to fall into a deep sleep and takes one of his ribs. He then uses the rib to create a woman. Interesting. Next, he places a tree in their midst and tells them to stay away from it. Don't eat of its fruit. He says this is necessary in order for them to have free will. He also creates a talking snake which wants them to disobey God regarding the tree. And get this, God is omniscient. He knows the talking serpent will tempt them to eat of the fruit of the tree. God's omniscience is a very big problem here. If you don't want someone to mess with something, you don't put that something near them if you don't have to. You do your best to keep it away from them. And you certainly don't put someone who wants your creation to disobey you near them. When they inevitably disobey Him, what does He do? He overreacts entirely, cursing not only them but their descendants as well forevermore. Here's what I would have done. If I had been calling the shots, I wouldn't have created the source of temptation nor the self-pitchment for the forbidden fruit in the first place. You don't need to put something near people that's off limits in order for them to have free will. After creating them, I would have simply told them to be good to each other, and if they didn't, I would have solely punished them. Case closed.
I agree. It's really interesting because the same idea of Adam and Eve expand through the three Abrahamic religions, whereas in Islam we don't have the eternal sin that we inherited, but still go through the whole, the whole process and explain the same steps of what God did, basically. Which is, I agree, is like, why would you create such a test, and you give me a tool, and basically you know that I'm going to fail the test, and that I'm going to live my entire life in a sin, that you can send your son to save me later. So.
Exactly. One of the points that I would like to make is that if you had kids and you didn't want them to do something, you wouldn't put a source of temptation near them. You would actively avoid letting whatever you didn't want them to do or touch near them. If there was a kid dealing drugs in your neighborhood, you wouldn't actively expose him to your kids, knowing full well that he wants to sell them drugs.
Yeah, but you forgot something, that God works in mysterious ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Old Testament doesn't matter because God was going through a phase then.
Yeah, his angry phase. All right, you want to go for number 2?
Okay. On to the Great Flood. God decided everyone on earth, aside from Noah and Kim, were so evil they all had to die. So he floods the entire world, drowning all infants, pregnant women, grandmothers, puppies, and kittens in the process. Hardly something an omnibenevolent being would do. Here's what I would have done. Let's just say that everyone except Noah and family were evil. Let's just say. I would have made everyone except Noah's clan sterile, so they would all die natural deaths on the same timeline that God decided to flood the earth. No animals die. Noah doesn't have to build a boat, nor does he have to herd 2 of every kind of unclean animal and 7 of all the clean animals. Easy as that.
Yeah. Actually, I heard that this is why dinosaurs got extinct, because they missed a boat.
Exactly. Yeah. They missed the boat on that one.
Yeah.
And another thing is that, let's just say this did happen. Let's just say that God decided to flood the earth, and he had Noah build a boat to save a lot of the animals, plus him and his family. Here's the thing that not many people think about. The fact that Noah built a boat means that boats existed back then. I'm guessing that there were many harbors around the world which had boats in them. And the people seeing it raining so hard and the flood waters rising would get in the boat if they had it. So not only would Noah survive, but those people who saw what was happening and got in their own boat would have survived as well.
Yeah. No, and actually, like another a good point is why there is some of the species that is isolated in certain areas of the world, and they're only existing in these certain areas. How did they get to these areas? Why they're only in this specific area and not anywhere else if this happened? And if God created all this without, the process of evolution.
Exactly. There are kangaroos in Australia.
Yep.
And if Noah was the only boat that was used to escape the flood, how did kangaroos get to Australia?
Does he jump that far?
Exactly. That's what they're good for. That's how they got.
Maybe that's why God created them made them jump.
Exactly. And again, like you said, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. So, all right. Our third question.
Okay. And now we cover God messing with Abraham by telling him to kill his son. Overall, this is a bad move. If he did this today in the United States and the authorities found out about it, they would call it cruel and unusual. Imagine how terrified his son must have been when Abraham grabbed Isaac, tied him up, and raised the dagger ready to act. If caught, Abraham would be locked away and Isaac would be taken away by social services.
That's true. Actually, I've seen multiple stories in the news where, someone tried to replicate the same exact, and they locked them in a mental institution, so that's what I would expect. The interesting thing is, I don't know if, a lot of people that doesn't have the Islamic background, so one of the big differences between Islam and Christianity is Islam claims that Abraham actually was about to slaughter Ishmael, not Isaac. Whereas it's different in the Old Testament.
Okay. Now, is the way it works? The Ishmael was
the son of Hagar.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Ishmael was Abraham's first attempt to have a son, which he had a son with his wife's servant. Correct? Is that the way that works?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So.
And now we get to what then went down in Egypt.
Yeah.
In Exodus, it says the Egyptians owned God's chosen people as slaves. God wants Pharaoh to let them go so they can be free. What does he do? He tells Moses to ask Pharaoh to let them go, and then, I kid you not, hardens Pharaoh's heart so he won't. 10 plagues and several countless innocent firstborn children later, he lets them go. Here's what I would have done. Lull the city guards and Pharaoh's army into a deep sleep. Pull Jericho and have the city walls come tumbling down. God's chosen people escape. No innocent firstborn children die. No animals die. Problem solved.
Yeah. Do you know that there is no actually historical evidence about this incident in any of the Egyptian history?
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
And even the numbers they are claiming. Yeah, I'm Egyptian, by the way. Just I never heard about this. I never heard about this outside the Quran.
He's Egyptian. He's never heard of it.
Which is built on top of these other two books. But the numbers they are claiming, even it's I think they are claiming 300,000 that did the migration, and the population of Egypt at this time, this number would have been about like 10% of the population. So there is no way that it would have happened without any mention in the Egyptian history, which they documented everything thoroughly. So
exactly. And another thing I'd like to point out is that let's just say all this did happen. When the angel of death went around to the Egyptian houses and the God's chosen people's houses, before the angel of death got there, the Israelis had slaughtered lambs and put the lamb's blood above their doors. Here's something I don't get. Is the angel of death stupid? Because the angel of death didn't have any divine assistance to figure out which houses were the Egyptian houses and which houses belonged to God's chosen people. I guess that it was a lot harder for the angel of death to find these houses without the invention of GPS.
Yeah. Hey, I think we have a caller. Hello?
Hello there.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Sure enough. This is Faithless Forrest. I've been watching the show.
Hey, Forrest. How are you?
Hey, Forrest. How you doing?
Okie dokie. Call me Faithless.
All right.
So, you were talking about, the Exodus story and how, God hardened Pharaoh's heart to, basically show that he could beat up on Pharaoh. But you didn't go into any of the details, the absurd details about the, the disasters that
the plagues.
The God of the Bible brought onto the Egyptians. This included things like killing all the firstborn cattle. Actually, maybe it was all the cattle.
Yeah.
And then after they were killed, he afflicted the people of Egypt and their cattle with boils.
Yep.
It does seem a little bit out of sequence there to kill them and then afflict them with boils, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like I said, God had some problems. God is a very confusing character. Like Imam said, he works in mysterious ways.
All right. And so, Imam, you were saying, though, that, as an Egyptian, you guys have never heard this story.
No, I mean, there is no mention of it in the ancient Egyptian history that we know about so far. The only mention really is just through this religious books, which is, the Bible and the Quran.
Well, that was precisely where I was going, is what mention of it is there in the Quran, and how might it be the same and how might it be different? Do you know, or
it's
well preserved?
It is actually really like exactly the same. It's word by word. It's a more summarized, but it is the same exact punishment that God brought into the onto the people of Egypt, and along with the whole story of how the Pharaoh died at the end, when the sea split and him and Moses like escaped, and then the Pharaoh and his army tried to escape, and then the Red Sea collapsed on them, and they died. So it's really very similar. I mean, me personally, I think I think that Muhammad was, if he existed, he knew well, the Bible and this history, so he copied a lot of the same information from these other two religions, and that's how he claimed that it is based on top of these two other religions. So.
All right. Well, that answers that question. I hope other viewers will call in and get you to compare and contrast, and I'll let you move on.
Thank you, Forrest.
Thank you, Forrest.
Bye now.
All right. So I think our number 5
Good.
is abortion, right?
Exactly. This one covers a passage that not many people, including and especially not many Christians, know is in the Bible. There's much debate over abortion rights. Pro-lifers say that God is with them and is on their side because of the passages in the Bible, such as the one in Jeremiah 1, 4-5, which says that God knows everyone, even when they're in the womb. But what the passage in Numbers 11 indicates is that God is not pro-life, nor is he pro-choice either. According to this passage, he's pro-abortion and anti-choice because the woman in question has no choice in the matter, and when she drinks the concoction, her body expels the fetus as she miscarries because, according to God, if she got pregnant by another man as a result of being unfaithful to her husband, this was what needs to happen. Now, in this passage, in Numbers 11, it's called the test for the unfaithful wife. And it details what according to Jewish law, needs to happen if a woman is suspected of going out on her husband, having intercourse with another man, and becoming pregnant with this child. It says that she's to go before the priest and to drink a concoction of water and dust. And say if this happened, if she got pregnant by another man, so may let this concoction expel her womb and let the fetus miscarry. And so she drinks the concoction, and this is supposed to happen. Now, this isn't really with the woman's consent. This is actually mandatory what needs to happen according to Jewish law. And like I said, not many Christians know this story and know that this is part of the Bible. Now, what this reveals is that not only is God not pro-choice, but God is pro-abortion, or more to the point, pro-expelling the fetus from the woman's uterus without her consent.
Will she get stoned or no?
That's a good question. Because like it says in the Bible, is that if a woman is suspected of not being a virgin on her wedding night, that she has to go before the town and they stone her on her father's doorstep. So if both laws are applicable, not only does she have to be forced to miscarry, but since she cheated on her husband and went out on her husband, that she also must be stoned to death. There's a passage in the New Testament where a woman who is caught in the act of adultery is brought before Jesus. And in the New Testament, which is, of course, all about forgiveness and more or less a new law ushered in by Jesus, extolling forgiveness. But this is the Old Testament. And according to the Old Testament, if a woman is unfaithful or if a woman has sex before marriage, she is stoned to death. So that's a good question.
Yeah, and actually in Islam it's very similar also. Actually, Islam took a lot of Judaism, but so first of all, if you are, if your husband is or your wife is trying to claim that you are unfaithful, first they need to bring 3 witnesses, and the witness, they actually need to see you in act. They actually need to see your organ going in her. So they need to actually close up. This is the only way that they can actually say the act happened. But once this happened, then the next stage is basically, if they are married, if she's married or he's married, then they get stoned to death. If they are, single before getting married, then they get 100 lashes. So.
Okay.
All right. It's number 6.
On to number 6. Now we get to God commanding a village to stone a man to death. Again, another example in the Bible about stoning. We get to God commanding a village to stone a man to death for gathering firewood on the Sabbath. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but gathering them on the Sabbath gets you killed. He was just working. He was harming no one. The way God responded to this incident is a clear case of, as the saying goes, much ado about nothing. If I were God, I wouldn't have had this as a commandment in the first place. If someone wants or needs to rest, let them rest. Working is not something to die over. It's as simple as that. So I now say to the 4th commandment what Manute Bowles said to Muggsy Bogues every time he blocked one of his shots the one time the 5'3" Charlotte Hornet was audacious enough to challenge the 7'7" Philadelphia 76er to a game of one-on-one. Get that out of here. And if I had to replace the commandment with another one, I would make thou shalt not own slaves the 4th commandment.
All right, I think we have another caller. Hello?
Caller, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Charles from Central Illinois.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, I don't know if I've got 10 full questions for God, but one of them is if the Holy Spirit infused the knowledge that went into the Bible, how come there are so many different versions of the Acts, the Gospels, and why were all those contradictions among them?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For instance, one of the epistles of Paul states that the return of Christ will be very shortly, and the next epistle he says, don't believe any of those statements about the apocalypse happening even soon, even if it comes from me. So that would be one very big question.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of contradictions. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, I'm a military brat, born in a military hospital overseas, moved around a lot, did for a time become one of the, quote, Jesus people, until all the contradictions added up way too much.
Yeah.
And the strong authoritarian view that they had, i.e. don't ask any questions, it's wrong. And their apparent love of censorship. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically they want you to follow the way it is. You can't question, you can't, I always, I grew up in a different background, but they basically give you a very small room to think about certain things. Yeah, you can ask the small questions, but you can't go beyond these questions. You can't pass these red lines, because basically that's where you cross the wrong territory. That's a point of no return if you start asking these questions, and they don't want you to think this way. So
I keep seeing the photographs of those signs. Reason is the greatest enemy to faith.
And as you're saying with your religious upbringing, it is often said that religion is answers that may not be questioned, and philosophy are questions that may not be answered. Another good point to make, keeping in line with what you're saying, is that there are so many different versions of the Bible. They try to say that, since the Bible is written in a different language, it's hard to interpret the Bible. Well, the Constitution is written in English, and when the Constitution is translated into other languages, there aren't 30 different translations with so many...
Each different language. There's different versions in the Latin, there's different versions in the Greek.
Yep.
And we don't have any of the originals written in either Aramaic or Hebrew.
Yep. It's really interesting because, it's always the same problem. One of the questions, the first questions I ask myself all the time is, why, if God actually exists the way these people talk about, then why he sent his commands in a specific language that no one else outside this region think about? And why all of it is in the small piece of the world which is called the Middle East? So it's, all this just doesn't make sense to me. The church through history tried to burn and hide a lot of these Bibles, but things, keeps popping up. Same thing with the Quran. They burned a lot of versions because that's how they try to hide the fact that it's written by human, that there is so many variations, and they want to say, no, there is only one version and it came from God, da-da-da-da. So how... go ahead. Now I was going to ask, how did you hear about us?
Well, I heard about you on a different show, and the now defunct Ask an Atheist from up in Oregon, I think, or Washington. And that was before they went off the air because they changed the rules up there on community television.
What rules did they change?
I've been watching for a while.
Oh, okay.
Another question I would like to ask them
Yep.
is, why are children being born with such things as leukemia and other such extremely malevolent, debilitating, often fatal, painfully so, diseases? What did that child do to deserve that?
Yeah. Well, this will take you to the, the three O's that contradicts with each other philosophically, that, he can't be like omniscient and omnipotent and
omnibenevolent.
Omnibenevolent. Yeah.
Which leads to, if he is, I think his name is, question about God, the problem of evil.
Mm-hmm.
Why does evil exist if God is all-loving?
Yep.
Is he all-loving and all-powerful once evil? Is he able to do it but won't? Therefore he is evil?
Yeah.
He's willing to do it but can't? Then he's not all-powerful.
Yeah.
If he can do it, if he can't do it, or will not do it, why call him God?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you for calling in. We appreciate your contribution to the show.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're at number 6. Oh, I think we go to break now. So where are we? All right. In case you are just tuning in, this is a Freethought Forum, a program by Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Knoxville Community Access Television, Channel 12 or Channel 194, depending on your local cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvnox.org.
This is a call-in show, and we are live today. Today is July 7th, 2015. And viewers can call in now to the number on the screen with a short comment or question. Call in now while we go to an informative break.
I think I have a video here.
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheist, agnostic, freethinker, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Our Tuesday meeting is going on now at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in Knoxville, Old City. We also have a highway trash pickup, which is a reminder to all RAT members. The Rationalists of East Tennessee will have their summer trash pickup along the Pellissippi Parkway on Saturday, July 11th at 5:30 p.m. The late hour is intended to avoid midday heat. We should easily finish before sunset. Meet at the Burger King at the intersection of Lover Road and Pellissippi Parkway. Gloved insect repellent hat and picker-upper device are recommended. We should finish by 8 or 8:30.
The Sunday of most months is the Skeptic Book Club. The title of the July book is House of Dead, How They and You Caused the Great Recession, and How We Can Prevent It from Happening Again, by Atif Mian and Amir Sufi. Sunday, July 12th, 2 p.m. The public is invited to participate. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalist.org to find the rest of the calendar of books, and join us at the new location, Books A Million, at 8513 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you will find that you don't believe in Zeus or follow Zoroaster or say you yuck to Yahweh.
You are not alone.
Not alone. So back to our program, John. So let's see, where did we...
Since we are going in the order of the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad things in the Bible I would change, let's talk about Elisha, the 2 bears, and the 42 young boys scared next. In 2 Kings 2:23 through 25, Elisha gets made fun of by a gaggle of youth. And what does he do to get even? He overreacts entirely, just like God is prone to do throughout the Bible, and calls 2 she-bears out of the woods in God's name, and they tear these young boys to pieces. We can see here that by doing this, Elisha is more thin-skinned than Donald Trump. What would I have done? Here's an idea. Don't.
So I actually have a question. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to number 6 because we got distracted by the caller and I forgot to ask my question, which is basically So in Egypt we have the religious holiday is Friday for Muslim. You know, you don't work on Friday, and we have here Sunday, and we have Saturday for the Jews. So that's like 3 days out of the week for the three religions that people don't do nothing. So
everybody gets a day off.
yeah. So yeah, I'm just wondering like how productive is God in their mind? You know, like if I have to sit for a whole day doing nothing, and and speaking about doing nothing, right now what's happening? You know, right now is Ramadan time, which is a month where people fast for a month from sunset to sundown, and basically during this time you're not allowed to eat or drink or do anything. You can still work, but most of the people that are fasting, their productivity drop about like 95%. So basically the way people go about this in Egypt is, you know, you go to you stay up late and you go to work, and it's basically like a month of the whole year where people are doing nothing and being unproductive because they are trying to follow the you know, the God of the Islam. So yeah, I think God needs to be more productive and actually help people to be more productive in their life.
Exactly, and another thing that I don't understand is that liquor stores are closed on Sunday, as if that's when they need to observe people not doing anything and going to church. In the traditional 7-day week, the 7-day creation week, God rested on the Sabbath. God rested on the seventh day. And like I said, I don't understand why liquor stores are closed on the seventh day, on Sunday, because if anything, I would say that after God worked all week, he'd like to sit back and kick back and relax
and enjoy a drink,
have a nice glass of wine. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
And like we said earlier, with these instances where pretty much anybody can come up with better decisions than God made in the Bible, we encourage you to call in and let us know what you think, what possible alternatives you could have come up with that are better than the decisions attributed to God.
Or if you have more questions to God,
exactly,
we have an open line with him now. So
exactly,
call now.
There's a number on your screen you can call.
All right.
Let's get to the story of Job. It begins with God and Satan chumming it up, because you know they do that. They then engage in a vain bet. God bets Satan that no matter what happens to Job, he won't curse God. So God permits Satan to literally wreak havoc on Job's life. This was, interestingly enough, the only people Satan ever killed in the Bible. That's right, Satan took out 10 people, Job's kids, with God's permission, while God offed over 1 million, including his own son, and Satan is the bad guy. My message to God would be, you're omniscient. You already know Job won't badmouth you. You have nothing to prove to Satan. As Full House's Uncle Joe would say, cut it out.
So actually, let's go more in depth in this, because actually Job is one of my favorite stories in general, because it shows like how childish this God is.
Exactly.
And also, you know, how careless he is about those people that he claimed that he created and he put on earth. So first of all, number one is he accepted a bet so that he can prove that one of his creations, Job, that he will never curse him.
Exactly.
So let's say like you're my best friend and I know you're never going to betray me. So to pay you back, I'm going to install the worst thing I can think about on you, and then see how you react, you know?
Exactly. It was a petty thing to do.
Yeah.
Yep. Very small. Large consequences, but very small thing to do.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's actually how the story ends. So, you know, after doing all this, he actually gets angry from Job. So...
exactly. At the end of the story, God actually breaks Job, talking about how awesome God is, and how little and insignificant Job is, as if he hasn't already done enough to Job. He, talks down to him for several chapters at the end of Job.
So how would you react if you were Job?
I probably, let's just say that if God existed and God did this to me, like you asked, I would probably get mad at God over it. I think anybody would. I think that's the natural reaction. Let's just say if you had a boss that was abusive, or you had an authority figure in your country, such as a president or a king or an emperor, that mistreated his subjects or the people in his country or his subordinates, you probably get mad at God or at the king or the emperor.
You know what's interesting is actually not just that, but people now look at this story and they're still following this God. I think we have another caller, so... Hello? Hello?
Caller, go ahead.
How are you? Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is there.
Good
But
afternoon.
on that Job story, I always thought it kind of showed that Satan was smarter than God, and Satan could easily con God into doing whatever the hell he wanted to, just for the living hell of it.
Yeah, can you tell us your name first before we get into the conversation?
This is Jeffrey. I'm from Southern Ontario.
All right. How did you hear about us?
Oh, it was a Faithless Forum was doing a podcast as a guest. It was
Okay.
years ago. This is the first time I've talked to you guys.
Okay.
The other members like Larry Rhodes and Eric and
Yeah.
John, they know me.
Okay. All right.
But anyways,
So
so
let-
they show God at his worst, the way he victimizes Job.
Yeah.
And God killed more like 3.5 million people in the Old Testament, not counting the time when he flooded out under the Noah story the entire population except Noah and the gang.
Yep. So how would you react if you were God in this situation?
How would I act?
Yeah.
I tell Satan to go back to hell and leave Job alone.
And how would you act if you were Job?
If I was Job, hey
Yeah.
God, up yours.
It's an
What is he acting like, a lapdog? No matter what you do to me, I still love you?
yeah
I
yeah.
put people in jail for doing that to
Apparently.
dogs.
Maybe it's some sort of Stockholm syndrome. You know?
Yeah, I know what Stockholm Syndrome is, and yeah, I think Job was suffering from that.
Maybe.
Maybe, but still, if you treated a dog the way God treated Job, you would lock up the human being.
I agree. Yeah. If you treated anything the way he treated them, then yeah. All right.
Any other,
Thanks for listening to me.
Do you have any other
See you some other time.
Do you have any other questions to God before we hang up?
are there any other instances that we've mentioned that you would respond differently than the way that God responded?
All of them.
Do you
All
have
of them.
Do you have any more questions to God that you would like to ask him?
I don't have enough belief in a God to even think of a question. So I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right.
And I don't believe that Jesus Christ was a real person.
Well,
Before you get into those stories,
yeah.
Jesus Christ, you got to remember, is a title. It's not a name.
Yeah.
It just means God's anointed Savior. There was 20 or 30 cults, at least,
Yeah.
that have been tracked over a 150-year period. That's roughly 90 BC to 50, 60 AD. They, being a traditional Semitic people, they would not give a name to the Savior, but they would refer to him only as a Savior, God's anointed Savior.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is simply their custom. And somehow they got translated into a real person named Jesus.
Well, there is definitely a lot of debate here if he existed or not. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for calling and
Thank you for
participating.
listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Bye.
Bye bye. All right. So what else we have for God here?
Okay. Now we get to the New Testament. We've been covering most of the Old Testament, and once again, like our caller just called in just now, As you're watching the program, if you think of any alternative, any other decisions that you could have made better than God, or if you think of any other solutions to the decisions that God made as I'm reading this, please feel free to call in. Here comes the virgin birth. God wants a son. So he gets a woman who is engaged to another man pregnant in a time and place where if women were even suspected of having sex before marriage, they were stoned on their father's doorstep. Interestingly enough, Mary manages not to be murdered by her fellow townspeople. 9 months later, God wills it that she travels 70 miles on a donkey while full term. Not to be outdone by his previous acts of insensitivity and inconveniencing this family, he has her give birth to her child in a barn. Must have wanted to have humble beginnings. Here's what I would have done. If you have to get a woman pregnant in that kind of place, in that sort of time, wait until she is married so she won't feel the shame of having people think she had sex before marriage. It's more kind. Also do it so she won't have to travel while 9 months pregnant. It's more courteous. If you have to have her make the journey, give her a room in which to give birth to your son. It's more chivalrous. The decision is obvious.
The question is, why do you need a woman to start with to have a son?
Exactly. Many Christians say that God had a son so he could, he could relate to us and have the human experience and go through what it was like to, be born and be a human. But, the real purpose, according to Christians, is that Jesus came to, instruct us on what we need to do to be good people, and ultimately, which we'll cover in the next instance when I read my final decision that I could have made better than God, to die for our sins, which is kind of ridiculous, and I'll explain why in the next.
You know what's really interesting that just came to me now, that I would love to see DNA analysis for Jesus, because as a child you get your DNA from both your parents.
Exactly.
So did he get all his DNA from Mary, or what? Or he has some from God?
Probably looked a lot like Mary, didn't he?
I guess so. Then in this case, is he totally female, or what? I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
I think we have another caller. Hello? Hello?
Go ahead, caller.
Hey, let me get a moment for the voice to equalize there. I got a problem with what you just said. You said Jesus was born in a barn. That do you recall?
Many people say it's a barn. Many people say it was a cave. There is much debate about the exact type of building or shelter that Jesus was born in. Yes.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't. He wasn't born in a barn, and that comes from the Gospels. I think they get that because there was a manger involved, and so they think it was a barn. And also your solution about making the people sterile and letting them die out around Noah's time, that might have been not that great of a solution since people lived about 900 years back then. So God would then have to be very patient for these people to die out. So I thought I'd offer that as well.
So I have a question for you. So how did people transition from living 900 years to living a span of 60 years now?
Well, apparently that happened right after the flood for no particular reason being cited. But after the flood, people started living a more reasonable amount of years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
All right. So let's go for our 10th question.
Good. And now we get to Jesus' crucifixion. We finally get to what John 3:16 calls God's greatest act of love, torturing to death his son for a better part of a day. To put this in perspective, I will use an analogy. Let's say you're the generals of a great army, or even were the manager of a Wendy's, and your troops disobeyed a direct order, or in the case of the restaurant, all your employees decided to no-show one day. They wanted your forgiveness, and you're willing to forgive them. You do not have your son, who is by all accounts an upstanding citizen, tortured to death, and blame your troops or blame your employees for your poor decision-making, and tell them not only if they believe you did this, they can be forgiven, but that you had to do this, and if they agreed, you could forget what they did, and from now on, things between you all will be totally cool. You are the one who decides the criteria which has to be in place in order for you to forgive them. Doing this to your son would be entirely unnecessary, bizarre, cruel, and more importantly, doing this would make you a bad father. If you want to forgive people, like Nike says, just do it. No guilt trip required. I begin this article by asking what these decisions made by God had in common. I will end with asking another question. What do all my alternatives to God's choices have in common? The answer is that they are all more humane, less complicated, more efficient, and above all, more loving than what God did. So when it comes to these events in the Bible, if I had been in charge, like the Kenny Chesney song goes, I'd have done a lot of things different.
Well, viewers, we would still like to hear your questions. Does anyone want to defend God's actions, which we have discussed? Also have some questions of your own about other immoral, nonsensical parts of the Bible. Please remember to call in. So I'm going to go back to your 10th point.
Okay.
Because that's really again, it's one of the other contradictions to this God is why do you even need to do this whole story? Why do you need to create a son and then torture him in this sadistic way, and and basically that's how you forgive people's sins. So it just makes no sense to me.
Exactly. I actually spoke with a pastor of a church the other day. We went out to lunch, and I actually told him some of the decisions that I thought I could make that were different and better decisions than the God of the Bible. And one of the decisions that I talked about was the one I just talked about just now. And I said that I wouldn't have killed Jesus instead it enabled me to forgive people. One of the things that he said was that it was not torture, but rather it was punishment. And my response to him was, well, you're still punishing somebody who didn't deserve it. So, in essence, it's immoral.
Yeah, the whole concept of actually guilt-tripping a child that was just born, that he's carrying all the sins on him, it just...
Exactly. It's emotionally manipulative and coercive. It's child abuse.
Yep, it is child abuse. All right, so now let's go to our program closing. It's time to start wrapping things up. Get out our pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee. I am Imam Al-Haq Abdel Fattah.
And I am John D. Webster. Please send us your feedback. Leave us a voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station at 21 Greenwich Mean Time, ctvknoxville.org.
We would like to thank our viewers and send our thanks to Sam and Jonas for technical support, to the staff at CTV Knox, and to all our callers.
Nuns, those who identify with no religion, are the fastest growing religious group in America right here in East Tennessee. The Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee are places you can find